Hello and welcome to the CFB edition of the Super Show. I'm your host, Walter Waddell, aka Dub Deuces 85, coming at you with the daily show grind. It's New Year's Eve. For those of us on the West Coast, it's already New Year's 2022. Thanks for those of you who are spending your New Year's Day / New Year's Eve, whatever time zone you're in, with me as I get ready to talk about the final classic CFB DFS slate that is bigger than 2 games or not a showdown. So we do have a 5-gamer on tap, which is exciting. Some games that really truly matter. I know bowl season's been pretty wacky overall. We've had a very profitable regular season, pretty profitable bowl season. We had a couple subs today, knock it out the park yesterday. We had a sub being a couple of like the 222 and cleared like, I don't know, 8K or something like that. We'll retweet that later on. Actually tonight, I should have done that earlier, but lots of good stuff happening. Georgia, in college football, the edge that exists for college football is massive. And I used to, I'm a big college basketball player. That is my bread and butter, but college football has been very good to me because you see a lot of groupthink in football in general, especially in CFB and betting wise, the public all high on Michigan. They beat Iowa. They beat Ohio State. They're the best of the best. They're best. Georgia lost to Alabama. They're no good. But people forget how good this Georgia team has been all year, defensively, offensively. I mean, they're running Stetson Bennett, who we still refuse to believe is a good quarterback over JT, but he continues to produce. Brock Bowers continues to produce. Their running game is strong right now. So that to me was a nice value, spot to bet Georgia. And they just decimated Michigan. So just that's one aspect of recency bias coming through. On the other side, we see it for DFS all the time. And we're able to find some really good leverage spots for it. So really good slate coming up here. I am going to be doing a college basketball show as well here in a couple hours. So probably an hour in between the two shows. The show must go on. The grind doesn't quit for me. So we'll be doing that. There's 12 games to talk about there. Lots of stuff going on. Appreciate those of you who continue to support the show live or on demand. Make sure you hit the like button for me. That helps the show garner more views and pop up anytime somebody types in, CFB, DFS, Super Show, any of those type of things. Our show comes up. So appreciate that. If you have questions, comments, concerns, I see Josh is already there in the chat. What's up, my man? We need to, address any news or any linemen who are going to be out. I know on the Ohio State side of things, there are a couple of linemen going to be out for them. We have seen time and time again, these are mattering. We need to take our edge a little step further, analyze these linemen or defensive people who are out and kind of adjust accordingly. WSU was down, their line obviously didn't care either, which is surprising because WSU, they stayed in the state. They wanted an opponent. They got an opponent and they laid an egg. And Jaden DeLora, who was very chalky, didn't come through, obviously. So they really did struggle, and that's just one of those things that, with their line, we should have stayed off. I was hell-bent on playing Jameson Williams today, so I ended up running one quarterback. Obviously, Jameson didn't really produce either, so neither play really worked. It was a kind of a low-scoring slate. But alas, we are on our way to a nice 5-gamer where we're going to do some serious damage. So it is hot in my place. So I may end up taking my hat off. If I do, just don't make fun of me too much. My hair is very messy under here. That's why I usually wear a beanie. All right. So we're going to go game by game like we do typically. I'm going to talk prize picks at the end. I'll give you guys my kind of initial 3-player core that I'm looking at. I know the slate locks, bright and early. So I'll have my article for both CFB and CFB out. By the time you guys wake up, it'll probably already be posted. For both, and then I'll be in the Discord prior to lock, chopping it up with you guys and discussing strategies, monitoring news. This is the part of the show where I say you should strongly consider subbing to FTN if you're not already. We have a 20% off discount if you use my code DUB off the niche package, which is basically the gold, which is all niche sports, collegiate sports, esports, NASCAR, tennis, pretty much all of that stuff. Getting into all of our premium Discords. You also get content, written shows, prize picks trackers, all that good stuff. The Discord alone is worth a sub because of the fact that we post all this news consistently. There are players being ruled out in both college football and college basketball. The rest of the industry is pretty slow to react. We see guys who are rolled out with 5 minutes to spare, still garnering 35-40% ownership. Huge. That pay the rake and then some, right? So the Discord is where it is at. There's also a promotion going on, 22%. I did see that earlier. Let me scroll through here. Bear with me while I find that. It's a special Christmas. We're doing the 12 days of Christmas. Okay, so the code XMAS8 expires on the January 2nd. That's day 7. Gets you 22% off monthly and annual of FTN daily membership and FTN bets. So that's if, you go with Diamond, which gets you every single sport, or if you go with the gold package, which is niche or specific sports. If you want to get on the betting side, 22% off. That is quite a deal. And that locks you in for the duration of your subscription. A lot of people ask, well, is that just, the 22% off for the first month? And some sites are like that, but no, we give you that discount for the entire time that you're subbed with us. Okay, cool. So that is enough promotion talk. Let's dive into the slate. First game that we are going to talk about is Penn State versus Arkansas. Right now, I show on DraftKings Sportsbook, -3 for Arkansas, 48.5 over under, which feels maybe a little low. I think this game definitely has a chance to go over. I do like the Penn State side. However, just the +3. I think Arkansas wins the game, but I think it's going to be a really close one because both teams are missing their top receivers on each side, which is definitely going to affect the offense to a degree. I mean, it has to, right? Jahan Dodson, who has made us a bunch of money in his career, he has opted out to focus on his career in the NFL draft and prepare. And then on the Arkansas side, total stud Treylon Burks has decided to opt out and focus on his draft preparation. So 2 stud wide receivers that we won't have to worry about. And on these teams, there are other guys that we can look at. There's actually a lot of wide receivers opted out on this slate, which we're going to talk about all of them. So we'll start with the Penn State side first. Quarterback Sean Clifford, who I was coming back, it sounds like. I was kind of excited to see what his backup Christian Valou might be, all about. He looked good in the time that he had played, but Clifford, it sounds like, will be back. He's only $6K on this slate going up against Arkansas. A very nice price for him. There's going to be 2 main builds that you see for this slate, and you're going to see people go all the way up to, pay for the top tier quarterbacks, 10K for Stroud, 9-1 for Corral. They'll be popular. I get it. But I think there's a lot of merit to actually paying down at quarterback or possibly only running 1 quarterback. And I'm going to talk dirty to you guys a little bit because I know that the church of 4 running backs hasn't really been in session. We've been neglecting our duties for a while the last couple of weeks. The slates haven't really been that rich in running back talent, and we've been running 2 quarterbacks, which is obviously pretty damn boring, right? So today on this slate for Saturday, our last, true classic slate with more than 2 games, we're going to be talking some 4 RB builds. Yeah, let's go. So this is one you can definitely do it. I could see running Clifford as your QB1. Definitely don't have any issue with it at his price. We're even seeing some of the top tier. I mean, aside from the Tennessee and Purdue game the other day, which we stacked that up, we haven't been seeing quarterbacks really massively destroy like that. So I think you can get away from paying 10K for Stroud, and have him hit like a 25 to 28 game. Even if he hit 30, you'd still be okay. If he's going to hit 45 plus, fading him would obviously feel pretty bad. So coming off Clifford's last game when the loss against Michigan State, 30-27, he had 34 pass attempts, completed 23 of those for 313 yards, 3 touchdowns on his way to a 25 fantasy point game. So roughly that's where Clifford's going to stand, between 22 to 25 fantasy points on average when things are cooking. Obviously, their run game is kind of, I would call it mediocre at this point. They're going to be without their top option. It could feel like a little bit of a down spot / trap spot for Clifford. However, they have priced into account that he is missing Dodson, and there's an opportunity for him to still make value and exceed. So while he's not my favorite quarterback on this slate, I definitely think he is viable and somebody that I would consider using. When it comes down to defensive stats for Arkansas, let's pull those up real quick. They're only giving up 215 yards to the air, about 156.3 on the ground. So defensively, they've been pretty sharp. Clifford, I think, will do well kind of on those short intermediate passes to guys like Parker Washington, Lambert Smith, maybe a little Sullivan Brown. So he's definitely got viable to the point where he's going to complete a lot of short passes and kind of rack points up that way, maybe not throw bombs like when he has Dodson. Running back wise, like I said, I don't have a ton of interest in any of the running backs. John Lovett, Noah Kane, Devin Ford, Kevon Lee, they've all kind of just cannibalized each other just really badly, and it takes the value right out of them, even though they're priced, reasonably cheap. I know Lee has, scored double-digit fantasy points in 3 straight. He has double-digit carries in 3 straight, and maybe it's, feeling like you can use him, but the second you do that, that's when you're going to see, Kane pop in there and get 15, or Lovett, who hasn't really had the season that everybody thought he would coming over when he transferred, him pilfering a touchdown. He did have a fumble in their last game, so he kind of got benched for that. Or even Devin Ford, who, garnered a couple of carries last game. So I just feel like that's way too cute. I want to use running backs who are guaranteed volume. There's some really nice price running backs on the slate that we're going to get to, and I just don't think we need to take a chance there with them. Wide receiver, you got to love Parker Washington as now going to assume that WR1 role. He is a guy that has, had several games this season where he looked like a star, the heir apparent, the future of this program. 5 catches for 148, 2 touchdowns in week 4, 9 catches for 108 in week 9. That was the Ohio State game. 6 for 72 against Rutgers with a touchdown, 4 for 60 and a touchdown against Spartans. So really safe play at 5'3", and he's somebody that I could see garnering quite a bit of ownership just because his price and he fits so well. I would feel a lot better about him than going down and taking a shot with somebody like Cam Sullivan-Brown, who is min price at $3K. He is projecting to have some ownership. These plays are very frustrating because, they're just kind of mediocre plays, and there's no guarantee that he's going to get all this additional work because of the other targets on the team. But we have seen some of these guys, Brock Thompson, for example, who was supposedly playing injured, and seemed like he was almost faking an injury, kind of came out of nowhere, had a career game for him. He had never had a game like that. So it wouldn't shock me if Cam Sullivan-Brown actually, caught 10 passes for 205 touchdowns or some crazy number like that. He shouldn't. I would much rather play Parker Washington. He has a very good rapport, a good chemistry, and a good relationship with Clifford. So I'd expect a lot out of him. And then Lambert Smith is there at 3-4. He's kind of the WR2 now. With that being said, without Dodson, looking at targets, you take out the 138 targets that Dodson accounts for. Washington second on the team with 78. Keandre Lambert-Smith third with 52. And then you have the tight ends there, Brenton Strange and Theo Johnson in the mid-20s, the running backs, and then you have Cam Sullivan, who has played in 12 games, 10 targets, 4 catches for 44 yards. So not a lot of experience, not a lot of touches for him. He doesn't have a ton of snaps on the season as well. So I feel like we can do a little bit better there with our value plays because there is some options here that I feel a little more comfortable with and guys that I know are going to get touches for sure. With that being said, expect Sullivan-Brown to be like 25% owned stupidly tomorrow and put up 30. All right, on the Arkansas side, I do like KJ Jefferson considerable amount on this slate, and I think I'm probably on an island with that because his price is up there at 7.7, nearly 8K. People aren't going to want to pay that. Penn State's defense on paper is pretty solid. They haven't really played a lot of elite dual threat quarterbacks, and not that I want to label KJ Jefferson just an elite player just yet. He's definitely trending that way. But we did see in the game against Michigan State, Peyton Thorne, 268 and 2, pretty solid game. They blanked Rutgers. Michigan just ran the ball. Maryland, they held the 14. When they played Ohio State, who obviously has an adequate quarterback, and CJ Stroud, he threw for 300 plus and a touchdown. Illinois doesn't really have a quarterback, so that's another one that juices up their defensive stats, right? Iowa, same thing. Villanova, Indiana. I mean, they played a lot of teams with just very poor quarterback play. So this is an instance where I think their stats look way better than they probably are. They had Bo Nix early in the season, so I'm not really that scared about using him against his Penn State team. And we kind of, I live by this mantra right now. I keep saying it all the time. I have these annoying catchphrases that I'll say for, a week and then I won't talk about it anymore. But defense really does appear to be optional in these bowl games. As we're getting these better teams on the slate, we're seeing defense mattering again, but it's not like they're totally blanking guys out. And Jefferson is going to have to do some serious damage here without Treylon Burks. And I think that he's going to have to be doing a lot more running than he had been. And he's done a lot this season. I mean, he's rushed for over 550 yards, 5 touchdowns. thrown for almost 2,600 yards, 21 touchdowns, only 3 interceptions, very good at limiting mistakes. They put him in a good position. He has kind of already mastered this offense. They don't ask him to be a hero too often. He just makes the plays he needs to make, and he'll take off when he needs to take off. Earlier in the season, he had a couple nice, 80, 90-yard rushing games, and then he kind of tailed off a little bit, but we know he has that ability to do so. If he doesn't even have to get the bonus, something like 75 and a touch, and then throw 250 and 2 touchdowns, something like that would make value. I don't think we need our quarterback spot to completely blitz or break the slate. I think 25 to 30 will be enough to cash this slate. So I do like KJ Jefferson as a lower owned guy. At running back, we have 3 options here. Penn State's definitely been worse against the run. I've seen some real, and that's the other reason why I like Jefferson, because he should be able to run all over them. Tank Bigsby, he tore them up. He had 2 touchdowns and over 100 yards on the ground. Illinois running backs, Chase Brown had 223 and a touchdown. Josh McCray, 142. Let's see, Travion Henderson, Trey Day, had 152 and a touch. So the running backs have had a much easier time against this Penn State squad. Hassan Haskins ran for a 156. So that's why I like Jefferson. Looking at the running backs for Arkansas, we have our brand favorite Dominic Johnson, Raheem Sanders, and then Traylon Smith. So 3.5 for Smith, 4K for Rocket, and 4.4 for Dom Johnson. Now, to me, and anyone else kind of paying attention to Arkansas football or DFS in general would tell you that Dom Johnson is the best of the 3. I do truly believe that. And I think he's in play at 4.4, and he's gone through some struggles here. He's kind of a raw player, and he's figuring things out. And now that they're giving him carries, weeks 10 and 11, he had over 15 carries in each. And then he kind of tailed off against Alabama and Missouri, which we expected a much better outing, but he didn't get the carries. He wasn't very effective. It looked to me like he might have been in the doghouse. They also were giving Traylon Smith some of his veteran, touches, some receptions, some targets, some additional carries in that game against Missouri. So I will be interested to see how it breaks down. But right now it looks to me like you can probably bet that all 3 are going to be something between 5 to 10 carries, which makes it hard to play them even at their price point. If I thought that one for sure was going to get, 12 to 15 totes, I would probably be all over them, because I am a believer in this Penn State rush defense being pretty poor. I do think, like I said, Tom Johnson is the best, but you're probably going to have to save these guys for GPP, unless tomorrow when we wake up and, news starts dropping on Twitter and something comes out like Traylon Smith has decided to opt out, and now all of a sudden we only have 2 guys that are going to touch the ball. With that being said, then AJ Green will come into play. But yeah, if we don't get any news, I think they're GPs only. As far as wide receivers go without Burks, that's a lot of targets, right? They use him and they give him carries, sweeps, everywhere, deep balls, screens, whatever you can think of. It leads the team with 88 targets. The next closest player is Warren Thompson with 33. So they really don't throw the ball all that much anyways. And when they do, it's typically to Treylon Burks. So Warren Thompson, Tyson Morris, Davion Warren, maybe Trey Knox, who at one time everyone thought Knox was going to be a fantasy stud. That didn't work out clearly. So we will have to look at and see here if there's any, true value. They're all super cheap, but again, there's not a really cut and dry answer to who it's going to be. Warren Thompson at 3.3 is probably the most intriguing to me, followed by Davion Warren at 3.2. And like I said, Trey Knox is a guy that has shown in the past he's capable of having productive games. He's kind of fallen off once Burks took off. So we have a bunch of GPP guys here. I think I would probably just run KJ Jefferson naked at the end of the day. Yep, haha, my kids in the back, when they hear that, they laugh. And just kind of ignore the weapons here, because there's some better wide receivers that still are reasonably priced that we can get to and count on for targets. All right, Oklahoma State, Notre Dame. Before we get to that, let's see what's in the news. All right, let's go. My man Josh is going to give us the info. We'll have to have Josh on, maybe if he's not camera shy next time. All right, so a lot of linebackers out for Penn State, it looks like. Wow, okay. Defensive ends, defensive line, safeties, linebackers, a right tackle. Arkansas is out without a defensive end and D-back. So defensively, a lot of guys on the front. That opens up that running game even more. They're already a mediocre unit. now you're taking out a bunch of guys. Yeah, I have a lot of interest in Jefferson. I'm really kind of I play a little recklessly. I tell everyone this, and even in college basketball, in cash game single entry, and it's not a reckless just to be reckless. It's kind of a crafted way that I like to play. And I don't set out just to play a guy just because he's going to be low owned. But if I usually, I'll do my article, do my research, do the show, whatever, and then I'll have my plays, and then I'll go look around and talk to other people and poke around and see what optos are saying. And if there's somebody I really like a KJ Jefferson, and then I find out that he's, projected to be 5% owned, then I really have the tight pants, right? So, that's kind of, and a lot of people be scared to play him in their main lineups because of the bust potential. But I just feel like he's a really good play, and you're telling me that half their defensive front is out. Yeah, sign me up. All right, Oklahoma State versus Notre Dame. Notre Dame's -1, 45.5 over under. Starting with Oklahoma State. Now as the season went on, Notre Dame's defense, especially their rush defense, really improved. They have an absolute bona fide stud, Hamilton at safety. That's going to be an NFL draft pick, top 10, no issue there. So their pass defense has been sharp, ever since the beginning. But starting out early in the year, we were able to this is another one of those leverage spots where people will be like, you're crazy, what are you doing? Using running backs against Notre Dame, and it was fairly successful. Now, as the season went on, they blanked Georgia Tech, Stanford didn't do that well, Virginia, they couldn't run anyways, Navy, a running football team, they shut down. So their rush defense became really good. But to start the season, that game against, remember the season started against Florida State and went overtime, and we saw Joshon Corbin went just nuts. Deshaun Ward went pretty nuts. And it was just one game, small sample. But I took a shot at our guy, Bryant Koback, Mr. Mac, from Toledo Rockets against them at like 2%. And he had a nice game, 122-1. And I thought to myself, hey, we may have something here. We may have a running back versus, a DVP spot for running backs against Notre Dame that absolutely nobody's going to, know about or use. And then the Purdue came along, and Xander Horvath was out, and I took a shot with King Duru, who's like damn near min price, only 45 rush yards, but he had 6 receptions for 39. He technically paid off. And then as the season went on, they started, picking up. They shut down Wisconsin, and things from there. They lost to Cincinnati. Jerome Ford had an okay game, and then it was over. So they're definitely sharpened up their defense. Now that we're in a bowl situation, it's not the bowl games that Notre Dame wanted to be in. We are seeing teams, regardless of how disciplined they are or how good their program is, coming into games that aren't the CFP, and they're not quite playing to the level you would expect. Wake Forest this morning damn near gave everyone a heart attack in the first half when they were being pushed by a Rutgers team missing Bo Melton, missing Isaiah Pacheco, their two main offensive players, Crookshank, who's been out anyways, and they were being pushed. And then all of a sudden, Wake Forest kind of woke up and said, well, we can't lose, because if we lose this game, we're going to be the laughing stock on Twitter for 24 hours. Can't have that, right? So then they won. And then we saw some Washington State Cougars come out really flat. As a Husky fan, I love to see the Cougars struggle, so I was happy to see it. So with that being said, Notre Dame is a team that they feel they belong in the football playoff every season. Might they come out flat here? Might they take some plays off? Their stud safety, I believe, is opted out, Hamilton. Might we have an opportunity here for a guy who has made a lot of dollars for us in Jalen Warren of Oklahoma State? The coaching staff for Oklahoma State during their pregame pressers and night before pressers, whatever you want to call them, said Jalen Warren is going to factor into this game a lot. He will get a heavy dose of carries. He will be the reason they win if they win. So Jalen Warren, he has a lot of mileage on him. That is for sure. He was been banged up. The guy has, he toted the rock over 237 times, 1,100 rushing yards, 11 touchdowns, fairly active in the passing game, 19 catches, 191. Recently, his carries have tailed off, and I wonder if, they were giving him 36, 33, 27, 32. As much as DFS players, we love to see that. We want our guys to have 30 plus. At the end of the day, taking a tackle 30 times is really obviously hard on your body. These guys are well-oiled machines, but you really can't give a kid for 12, 13 games, 35 carries or more. It's just, he's not going to hold up, and they're going to have injuries by the end of the year. It happens. We saw it happen on this very same team the last 2 seasons with Chuba Hubbard. So he's been banged up. However, they say he's now healthy, ready to go for the Fiesta Bowl, ready to kick some Notre Dame ass. His carries seem to be trending back up before this anyways. He wasn't needed against Kansas, wasn't needed against West Virginia, wasn't needed against TCU. They've been in a lot of blowouts, actually. In the Oklahoma game, in which they did pull that off to win 37-33, he just had the 17 carries. He was largely ineffective. Did score a touchdown, but he was super banged up. That allowed his price to drop pretty much the cheapest it's been since the beginning of the season, when he came in at like 4-1, 5-6, kind of stupidly, when he transferred from Utah State. So at 6-1, I'm a big Jalen Warren fan. I think I will have a lot of exposure to him, and I think he is very solid play in all formats. Being that it's a 5-game slate, not a 2-game slate, we should see some very spread out ownership. He'll probably come in at like 18 to 20%, which has been a pretty sweet spot for us. In the beginning, when I came over to FTN, we had, Travis Dye low owned. We had Deuce Vaughn low owned. We were pretty good about nailing these lower owned running backs. So I feel pretty confident that Jalen Warren's going to do some damage, and we'll have, probably most of the shares on him in the industry will come from FTN guys, if you follow me on that. At quarterback, the one man who could ruin Jalen Warren's day would be Spencer Sanders. He is one of the most tilting players in the Big 12. He is not somebody I'm going to tell you that I want to use at 6'8". I'd rather, find the money for KJ or just go down to Clifford. He'll have some ownerships, whatever. What I'm concerned about with him is the fact that when they do get in the red zone, he does steal those rushing touchdowns at the most inopportune times. And getting vultured is there's never an opportune time or a time where you get vultured and you're like, I feel so good about this, right? It's always shitty. But he especially does it when Warren has been the one to, 60 yards down the field. It's like, let the kid finish the drive. Don't allow Sanders to steal it. How demoralizing as a player would you feel if you were the reason they're in the red zone and they're like, we're going to call Spencer's number and let him get the glory, right? So, and he's an interception machine. So he kills drives all the time. They'll have momentum, and he's a drive killer. So Sanders is the main concern if you do roster Warren, not because we want to roster Sanders, but because he's a drive killer. I love Tay Martin. Tay Martin is my Brock Bowers play of the day. I know Bowers, the game got out of hand too fast. So again, Bowers became a first half, didn't pay off today, didn't work out. I feel like this game should obviously stay close enough. Hamilton not playing, the secondary, the Notre Dame defense likely being less enthused about the game. I think Tay Martin could have a big one here, and it may not be a big one as far as yardage goes, but PPR work, I'm expecting him to have 14 plus targets potentially, 9-10 catches. He had that game against Baylor, 9 catches for 88 yards. Wasn't great, nearly 20 points. At 7-3, it's not a killer. You want to see him score 20 plus, obviously, and get touchdowns. He is Spencer Sanders' number one favorite target. He has 7 touchdowns catches on the year out of 70 receptions, 942 yards. So very close to the 1,000-yard mark. I'm sure he's aware of that. I'm sure he wants to get that. So Tay Martin is a guy that we may not be able to afford, but for GPPs, I definitely like him a lot. Everybody else on this team, like Brennan Presley, Rashad Owens, Bryson Green, Jaden Bray, they've all had their time in the value spotlight, and there's kind of like the flavor of the week. Presley has been mostly the best, but he's $5K now, kind of pricey. So I would just really ignore all of them and look to Tay Martin in this one specifically, or Jalen Warren. For Notre Dame side, we do have some value here. Quarterback, we don't, it's Jack Cohn. So I got another show to do, so I'm not going to talk about Jack Cohn. I'm sorry if you're on him. We can talk about it in the Discord if you are. Running back, Kyren Williams, he is opting out. He is going to the pros, as he should. This means we have mega value at the running back spot for Notre Dame. And Chris Tyree is not your normal backup guy who doesn't really play, and you're kind of unsure about how he's going to perform. Tyree's been a guy who has been pretty active throughout the year. He was banged up. He had a really nice first month of the season, and then he was banged up, and then he kind of got phased out a little bit, and things really kind of got away from him. But he is a big time fantasy producer when he's getting the work. You see against, and he gets receiving work as well. So the first game of the season against FSU, he put up a solid 14, Toledo 15, 9-8, so at 3-1, we, it's not like basketball where, we need the 5X or whatever. if he gets 9 to 12 fantasy points at 3-1 and he allows you to, get these pay ups like a Tay Martin, or if you want to go up to Stroud or whatever it is you want to do at this pay up side of things, Chris Tyree's going to allow you to do that. Now he's going to be probably pretty popular because of it. Although I could see his ownership not be as high as it probably should be because of the fact that Oklahoma State's defense has been an adequate unit. Again, bowl games defense has been kind of an optional thing. We're not seeing these lockdown units that we would normally be accustomed to. With that being said, Oklahoma State has held opposing rushers to under 90 yards per game, opposing passers under 190 yards per game. So their defense has been truly elite. I'm probably not looking too much even at the pass catchers for Notre Dame. I know there was some talk about Baby Gronk, Michael Mara in the Discord earlier. It would just be Tyree for me. And even if they're able to hold him to a 40, 50-yard game, he'll do enough in PPR work, catching, getting some yardage there, that he'll still probably pay off the 3-1. So he is my favorite value as we're working through the slate. He's the number one value right now. As we talk about these next games, some other value may emerge. I like to kind of go through the slate. I've already gone through it, but kind of break it down with you guys frame by frame and talk about it there. Other guys who may get some work, Logan Diggs, who is more expensive than Tyree, so that wouldn't really make too much sense. Sibo Flemister is not an option anymore, so it's really Tyree. As far as the pass catchers go, Mayer at 5'9" is an interesting GPP play just because he is semi-matchup proof and can do some damage here. But I just don't think that he's really worth that $6K salary in anything other than an alt lineup. And then Kevin Austin's price has come up. Braden Lindsey, we got some nice usage out of him midseason as a value 3-5 guy. But I'm really not going to press too hard in this game because it is going to be, on paper, a bit of a rock fight. But I do like the two running backs in this game, mostly with some Tay Martin. All right, let's see. Cruising right along. Kyle Hamilton is out. Figured that. Yep. Right tackle, Josh Lugg out. Okay, so Kieran and Kyle Hamilton, both we expected them out. We kind of mentioned that, and then one right tackle for that. Appreciate it, Josh. I'll have to hook you up with an FTN shirt for helping me out. All right, so Iowa versus Kentucky. Another game that is probably not going to have very much ownership, and with a 5-game slate, you can kind of avoid it if you want, but I think it would be a mistake, honestly. And I already know everyone's going to be going to Ohio State and Ole Miss, and that makes sense. And that's definitely the right move for your cash games and single entry. But this Kentucky Iowa game, I think, is going to have a couple guys come out of it, either making value or exceeding value. Total is only 44, lowest on the slate. Kentucky's -3. We know at this point that Iowa is an abomination for all things fantasy. Quarterback is Spencer Petras. No thanks. Running back, we do know that Tyler Goodson has opted out, or he will not be playing. That is going to open up some things for us. Man. Okay, so we have some min-price guys. Tyree's still the best out of this group of cheap guys, but you have Ivory Kelly Martin there at 3K. You have Gavin Williams there at 3.6. These are guys who will get carries. Gavin Williams has 10 plus carries in 3 of his last 5 games, so they have been giving him work. His YPC is right around 4.2, 4.5 for the season. So he's not horrible, and he has been taking the first team reps in practice, but I would expect Ivory to get carries too. So Gavin Williams is definitely there if you need him. You want to punt twice at running back. I probably wouldn't recommend it. I would probably take one or the other. I do see Ivory Kelly Martin projecting a little higher owned, which is probably just due to the fact that he's 3K, and everyone's going to want to play Stroud, and I'm going to probably fade Stroud and then cuss about it later, like I did with A.T. Perry in my high dollar stuff. So take one or the other, Tyree or Gavin Williams. I don't think you want to play both. And then wide receivers for Iowa, it's kind of just this team has been in a void, even on 3-game slates. It's just, you find a way to avoid. The most viable and playable guy would be Sam Laporta. I do like him as a player. I just don't see the need to play him. He's only 3.7 though, if you want to take a shot. Strangely, I do kind of like Will Levis in this game. He's 7-1. No one's going to play him. It's Iowa. Iowa's, everyone avoids Iowa games, but he has been, that's a lot of Iowas. He has been a really strong option recently, and he's playing extremely well. And I'm super excited about this Kentucky team. They're going to be so good for fantasy next year. He comes back. Taj Harris, the Syracuse transfer, he is coming to Kentucky. I believe Wandell is back. They're going to have a really strong group of receivers and weapons for him to throw to, and they're going to put up a lot of points. And we're going to be double and triple stacking them often. I'm really excited about Kentucky football, which is strange because usually I don't like the Kentucky program, not a Calipari guy, and I hate their basketball team, but football team is okay by me. 3 of the last 4 games, he's been over 34 fantasy points. He's been using his legs a lot more, not necessarily the yardage, although he did rush for 113 against Louisville. Everybody usually does that, and 4 rushing touchdowns. Certainly not expecting that, but I think even here against Iowa, he has a shot to, potentially get some rushing scores. He calls his number when they get in the red zone. Their offense is efficient enough. They have an amazing weapon and, a Khalil Shakir type weapon in Wandell Robinson, who, takes carries, jet sweeps, screens, deep balls in the slot, out of the slot, every possible, position possible or touches he can get. Excuse me. And so I do like Levi's here. I wouldn't use him in my main, but I think it would be a mistake if you're running like 5+ lineups to fully fade him, because at the end of the day, I don't want to hear anyone be like, oh man, he scored 35. How? No one saw this coming. Like, I think it's totally possible here against Iowa. We've seen Stranger in bowl games, and he's a really good player, and he deserves credit for being a good player. Granted, his explosion games were against Louisville, New Mexico State, and Tennessee, all defenses who can't stop, your son's elementary school team. So I do recognize that. I'm not a complete fool about it, but he's been playing really good football lately, and you have to recognize that. As far as running backs go for Kentucky, Kavasier Smoke is there at 3.3. We really wanted to make him work. He's a Kuchek play, and Kuchek's really good. My usual co-host, it's New Year's Eve. He's couldn't get it off with his wife, I think, to join me today. But he is really good at plucking out these really cheap, kind of randomized plays that you wouldn't expect. So we really wanted Kavasier Smoke to be a play midseason. It just didn't work out. It's really the Chris Rodriguez show in terms of carries. You don't want to mess around with anyone else. 6'6". He's more expensive than, Jalen Warren, who I like better. He's right around the same price, only $200 cheaper than Abram Smith, who I think is an infinitely better play as well. Less than $1,900 cheaper than Tavion Thomas, who I think is an infinitely better play. So I don't see myself using Rodriguez, but he's also one of those guys that will punch it in 3 times in this spot. And he could do it with, 40 yards. He's a really strong bowling ball style back that has 4 straight games over 100 yards, granted easier opponents, but he finds a way to get it done. So don't necessarily sleep on him entirely. And then a wide receiver, things are a little more interesting here. Josh Ali, who's basically the WR2, former WR1, is not going to play. He's ruled out. So it's going to be the Wandell Robinson show. They've also had a couple of transfers out of the program because of the fact that Kentucky's bringing in these high, level wide receivers. Guys who are barely playing, like Isaiah Epps, are leaving. So Isaiah Epps, a guy that Will, had found a couple times this season, is out. It's basically Wandell Robinson, Justin Rigg, and probably some fireworks but there's some gunshots. It's fireworks time. It's getting close to New Year's, I guess. Isaiah Cummings at 3.2 would be probably the other option. Now it's going to cost you a lot for Wandell, and we have some really, post-traumatic stress disorder syndrome, whatever you want to call it, with paying up at wide receiver lately. Jordan Addison didn't really pay off a day or two ago. Jameson Williams didn't pay off a day or two ago. So we're getting, I see it in the Discord, I see it on Twitter. People are gun shy about paying up for wide receivers, and especially in matchups that are on paper or deemed less than desirable. I do think Robinson is a really a swell play, and I want to play him. I want to get him in, and I'm not as worried about this matchup for him. Just because they use him in so many different facets of the game. He's going to have a very high, rate of volume, touches. He's going to do everything for this team. He'll find a way to get open. So even at the 8.2 price, maybe maybe stupidly even, I'm going to be on Wan'Dale Robinson here. I just don't see a way to fade him. And again, I don't want to try these 3K wide receivers. They're just not working out that well. Brock Thompson was a different situation because of the fact that he was, and there is a starter, David Bell and Milton Wright were out. Isaiah Cummings, Brendan Bates, Tay Crooms. They may have cool names, but the production just may not be there. All right, Utah versus Ohio State. So this is going to be the game that you see massive ownership from. And I love the fact that it's an all-day slate. Again, we saw this during championship week. They'll do another, mid-slate, small slate. So if you whiff on your Arkansas, Notre Dame exposure, whatever, you have other slates to play. But I absolutely love these all-day slates because you'll find edge-wise people that play them will set their lineup and people have lives, and I understand that, and I get that, and I'm going to take advantage of that when I can. So they'll walk away from their lineup and go do something and have brunch, and they'll miss the fact that, Tay Martin is out or whatever, Chris Tyree. Let's say we wake up and then 10 minutes before Notre Dame game locks, all of a sudden Tyree is got bubble guts. He can't play. He's out. And we know Tyree's probably going to be 30, 40% owned. There's going to be a very small portion of people, grinders that get him out. So I love these all-day slates. With that being said, save some PMR for this game because it's going to be a good one. It's -4 for Ohio State, 64 over-under, so it's the highest on the slate by a lot. Ohio State's defense has been a significantly weaker unit this year. It's been trending that way for the last 2 or 3 seasons, similar to Alabama. We mentioned that on the show 2 nights ago, that Alabama's defense has been, getting kind of on a softer side. I know they showed out today, but the first few drives, it looked like they were going to struggle, and then they kind of tightened it up. And that same thing with Ohio State. So Utah should be able to score at will. Ohio State, of course, and these are obvious. We know these because this has been reported, is going to be out without quite a few guys. Garrett Wilson, Chris Olave, 2 of that, that trio of pass catchers that you could damn near quad stack with Stroud all season long and perform are out. And that's a huge amount of targets to be out. Now, this would feel like a trade A game, right? He's going to get some additional work. He's a pass catcher. He's going to do some damage. We know our guy, Jackson Smith-Njigba. He made us a huge amount of money in that game a couple weeks ago where he was super low owned and he went for like 45 or whatever. He's a brand fave. He's a monster. But we know that Ohio State's going to be missing some of their O-line and some other key contributors that make this machine go. So we do have to be aware of that because we've seen teams time and time again this bowl season really struggle when they don't have that continuity on the O-line. I mean, you see it in the NFL all the time. They're patchwork. My Seahawks, they're patchwork and, backup third string O-line because someone's hurt or they're ineffective, and all of a sudden everyone's wondering why this guy got sacked 10 times. Well, we know, right? So I do want to be aware, and Jake already made a good point in the Discord earlier when people were discussing the slate initially, that as much as he loves Travion Henderson, there may be some struggles for him to find room. But with that being said, he is an explosive runner, an elusive runner, and a powerful runner. So even without, the premium O-line that he's accustomed to in a patchwork unit, I still think he could find plenty of room and do enough damage. But with that being said, he is going to cost a very high amount at 8.2. And I like Wan'Dale a little better at that same price. And I think we can pay down for Thomas in the same game and get similar, if not better production. So Henderson is more a GPP guy for me for that reason. With that being said, I will be all over Jackson Smith-Njigba, and I expect the industry to be all over Jackson Smith-Njigba because you take away – let's talk about targets for a minute. So Ohio State targets, Garrett Wilson leads the team in targets with 102, and he played one less game than everyone else. Olave with 101, and then you have JSN. I will refer to him as JSN the rest of the way, 96. So third on the team at 96. So that's your 3 guys. Then you have tight end Jeremy Ruckert with 34 targets. Travion Henderson with 24, and Julian Fleming, who is going to come into play today/tomorrow, whenever you're watching this, with 13 targets. JSM is going to probably target A.T. Perry level amounts in this slate, in this game, probably 15 plus times. Wouldn't surprise me to see it be 20 times. So you have to lock in that kind of production. I know the Utah defense has been a very strong unit. They spanked Oregon a couple of times. They really made them look silly. But Ohio State's offense is just a really well-oiled machine, even without their normal cast of characters. So 7-7 is a deal for JSN. I would probably have paid like 8.5 for him, and I may even have considered 9K just because of the fact that Wilson and Olave are out, because that target share for him now becomes like maybe David Bell level, Kanata Mumfield, who was another brand favorite. These high usage wide receivers that don't necessarily share, and they're the alpha on their team. Nathaniel Dell, his target share is going to become like those guys level. I do think it's Julian Fleming is a little interesting at 3.8 price tag, because I would expect him to jump into, a higher volume spot. He hasn't, even when, guys have been banged up or out like Wilson, he really didn't step up anyways. It just became the JSN and Olave show, or if Olave was banged up, it'd be Wilson and JSN. So Fleming really hasn't stepped into it. So I'm a little more hesitant to use him. Even at 3.8, which is a nice price. If I was going to use a secondary Ohio State guy, I'd probably just be Jeremy Ruckert. He does have, pretty decent touchdown equity, and Stroud will find him in the red zone. And then getting to quarterback, CJ Stroud, 9.9. So this is going to be probably the slate decider for most of you, for everyone really, because he's projecting to be one of the highest owned quarterbacks. It's 10K. It's a really steep price. It's not a situation where we're going to see a big shootout. I mean, it may be high scoring, but what I mean by shootout is like that Purdue-Tennessee game where they were just marching down the field in 2 minutes and chunking 20 to 30-yard passes every time. Ohio State's capable of doing that. Utah, that's not their style. They run the ball. They're going to at least try to control the clock, keep that Ohio State offense off the field, run it to Thomas a lot, and drain the clock down. The offense is very efficient, but they won't move as quick as Ohio State. That's a knock against Stroud. That's less possessions. That's less attempts. That's less time on the field for him. So that is my main concern about playing him. Because everyone's walking around talking like it's a lock, and he may very well put up 40. That is a very real possibility, even against Utah. But I just think that Utah's going to have a solid game plan here, and they're going to have the running room with Thomas to kind of control that clock. So as of now, Stroud is not a main team play for me, since he's projecting to be one of the highest owned players on the slate. He's probably not even a GPP play, because, why would I use him in a GPP spot if I'm not going to use him in cash with everybody having him? That being said, if I'm running, 3 to 5 lineups minimum, I got to have at least one, because if he does drop like a 50 and I don't have any, I'll feel like a complete idiot, right? And that sometimes happens when you play the way I play with leverage. So I'm not using him in my main build. I'm trying to convince myself that I'm not using him in my main build. On the Utah side, Cameron Rising at 6.7 is okay. He's kind of more valuable in the running game. He makes the throws he needs to make. He isn't asked to win the game on his arm very often, but he also doesn't make a ton of mistakes. Since he took over and chased Charlie Brewer out of town, although he has thrown 3 interceptions the last 2 games, he wasn't a high interception guy. Only 5 for the season, 18 touchdowns, 5 rushing touchdowns, 407 rushing yards. So he has a lot of value as a dual threat guy. Then people don't even really realize that. He kind of just quietly suddenly, oh wow, Cameron Rising has 80 rushing yards and a touchdown. When did that happen? So I do like him. I think he's a fair play. Ohio State's defense is a soft unit. And then you get to Tavion Thomas at 7.5. Utah churns out running backs like crazy, man. They have had some really good running backs in their program, and they have just done miracles with their ability to churn them out. Pledger came there from Oklahoma. Everyone thought he would be it, and then Thomas kind of just, took over in week 2 or 3 or midseason and just became a stud. Now, they had Ty Jordan, RIP, in the similar role, kind of a similar runner to Tavion Thomas, and Ty Jordan was expected to be, this big stud, and Thomas really stepped in and filled that same role. So they have a very specific prototype of runner that excels in their system, and Thomas is going to get a ton of work. Like I'm expecting, 25-ish carries for him. He seems like just a mortal lock for 20 plus fantasy points on the level of a Braylon Allen to me, even with, Micah Bernard maybe taking some carries. Although I need to check his status. I think he might've been banged up. And then we know that TJ Pledger has declared, but he is supposed to play in this Rose Bowl, and he is going to, take 5 to 10 carries himself. So there's a lot of running that's going to be taken here with his backups, but they run the ball so much, and Rising taking red zone looks, but Thomas is just a strong runner, and every time they get within like 25-ish yards of the end zone, he finds a way to get in. Multiple games where he scored 2+ touchdowns. He had a really sick streak from weeks 8 to 14 where he scored 2+ touchdowns in all but one game. And 2 of those was against so seemingly, what everyone said, a tough Oregon defense, which ended up being BS. So Tavion Thomas is my guy. This, as I mentioned, this is becoming a church of 4 RBs, house of 4 RBs, however you want to refer to our group. 4 running back slate. It definitely feels like it. And then wide receivers, they've priced up the guys that we were usually using for Utah. Brant Kuthi, Britton Covey. Kuthi's been a guy for the last 2 years on the late slate, has made us some good money, but at 5-1, I don't have as much interest in him. Dalton Kincaid at 4-2. This offense also, they run a lot, but they also put their tight ends in really good positions to score touchdowns. So Kincaid has done quite a good job this year, kind of quietly. He's only 4-2. I could see possibly using him. They have some tight end signees that are supposed to be really big next year, and a tight end transfer that they're talking to. So they're really building their offense. They know their personnel and what they need. Tight ends and running backs. That's what you want to target here. So Tavion Thomas, and I don't mind using Thomas with Rising in a lineup. It's not a conventional thing that you typically see, a running back and a quarterback together, but it has worked a lot this year. So before we go to the last game, nothing to report about Utah. Ohio State has a couple of offensive tackles out, linebackers. So we'll keep digging into that as the morning comes out. When they're warming up, we usually get inactives list if we're lucky. And we have been on some of these teams. All right, Baylor versus Ole Miss. This is the other one you'll see a ton of ownership in. Close game. Should be a pick 'em, really. It's -1 for Ole Miss, 58 over under. Matt Corral, who's off to the pros, what a swell guy, has decided to play in their bowl game, which is great. That's commendable. So he's going to be popular at 9-1, but you're going to have to decide, are you going to play Thomas or Trey Day or who are you going to play at your skill positions? Because if you're playing Matt or you're playing Stroud, or I've seen a couple people talk about playing both, you're going to be sacrificing something. Defensively, Ole Miss has been much better this year. Last year, they were giving up damn near 600 yards of total offense to their opponents. That was great. They're still putting up 500+ yards themselves, but they're down to about 430 for their opponents. 183 yards on the ground. You can run on them quite easily. And then passing wise, they're right around 245, 250. So still not a great defense, but they're not like Wake Forest level bad like they used to be. Missouri level bad. They're somewhat adequate. They usually are just outscoring people. And then Baylor, we know Baylor, they have a pretty adequate defense, and they have all season. They have given up about 119 rush yards per game, 231 passing yards, which equates to about 330 yards per game. So a better unit. If anyone were going to, stop or contain Ole Miss, I think they would be capable. They don't get enough credit for just how good they are. However, this game is being played in a dome, and we're probably going to see some vintage Matt Corral game here. Jerry Bohannon. He's at 6'3", dual threat guy. I think you could certainly look at him as well. He's kind of in that Clifford, price point. He was dealing with that hamstring, and he's going to play. So that's the type of injury we could see flare up. He hasn't played for a couple of weeks. So you like to think that he'll be fine, but that is something to monitor or be aware of, as you go. He is projecting to be the third highest, top 5, I should say, in ownership for quarterbacks. And again, he's a guy that's going to put up probably 20 to 24 fantasy points most of the time. Could be less, could be more. He's just okay. I don't feel like the quarterbacks are going to break the slate on this one. Could be wrong, but that's what I feel. At running back, I'm super high on Abram Smith at 6'8". We just said Ole Miss has been getting gashed by, the run game, giving up a ton, 183. Just to kind of pull up a few of their games this year and what it's looked like. Let's see, Texas A&M, Devin McCain, the Arachnid, 110 yards, 2 touchdowns on only 12 carries. Pretty solid there. Shidro Lewis for Liberty, 101 yards and a touchdown. Josh Mack, 98 yards. Malik Willis, the stud, 71 yards. Auburn kind of smacked him around 31-20. In that game, our guy Tank Bigsby, 140 and 1. So, they're not going to be able to defend Abram Smith very well. I feel pretty confident in that. With that being said, how often have we had Abram? And he got there on yardage, but he would score 1 touchdown or 0 touchdowns when really he should have had 3, 2 or 3. You got the man Treston Ebner looming there as a vulture. You've got Bohannon as a vulture. They'll in the 3-yard line. They're not afraid to throw it, to Ben Sims for a touchdown. A lot of tilt when it comes to Abram Smith and his touchdown equity. He has rushed for 12 on the season. But honestly, with his looks and his workload, it should be closer to 20. And he's gotten ripped off a lot. Him and Jalen Warren have both done a significant amount of work getting into the red zone and only to watch someone else score. He has actually only scored 1 touchdown in their last 5 because Treston Ebner has been taking so much. Ebner's interesting at 4.9. He gets passing work. His touchdown equity has been pretty decent. He had that game against Texas Tech where he caught 4 passes for 118, and he was chalk. Chalk runs too good. He's going to get 10 to 15 carries there, and Abram Smith's probably going to be in the 20 to 22 range. So if you want to use Ebner because you think he'll do just as good on fewer carries but a cheaper price, I don't mind that, but I just feel like Abram is a really strong play, and he does catch some passes too, not nearly as much as Ebner, but I think we see him put up quite a good game. So I'm on Abram and then Ebner for GPPs, and then wide receivers. The Baylor wide receivers are a tilt fest as well. You're going to see, it could be an RJ Sneed game. You'll see Tyquan Thornton, do well. Ben Sims or Drew Estrada. We had some love affairs with their value guys at one point. But it's really just going to be Bohannon or the running backs, I think. Looking at targets, Tyquan Thornton does lead the team with 95 targets. Sneed's the next closest to 58, Sims 47, Estrada 40, and then it's Ebner 33 and Smith 15. So pretty concentrated targets there with Thornton. You would have to, semi-pay up for him at 5.8. If he was in the low 5s, I think I may feel a little better. With that being said, he's been priced up around 7K the last month of the season. So 5.8, in a game that potentially shoots out is definitely a play, but more of a GPP play. Ole Miss. Now, what you're going to have to ask yourself is if you're fading Stroud, do you need to play Matty C here at 9-1 because his upside, he's probably one of the only other quarterbacks on the slate that has the upside of Stroud, and his upside's better because he's, a much better runner. He'll score touchdowns there. His rushing yardage has not been there like it was in the past, but he's still scoring rushing touchdowns, still passing, 300 plus yards quite frequently. He has been a little quieter the last month of the season. You see a lot of mid, 20s, low 20s, which does, not necessarily scare me, but it does make me question if I want to pay 9-1 for him because they are running the ball a lot more. Jarian Ely, who looked like he was written off that game against Auburn where he was like 4-1, and it felt like a really good spot to target him. He got 3 carries for some reason, and then, we jump off the ship, and all of a sudden 10 carries, 24, 16, multiple touchdowns, and he's getting heavy work. He scored 20-plus fantasy points in 4 straight since it looked like in the Auburn game he was out of the system and in the doghouse. He's catching a lot of passes, 4+ receptions in 4 straight, 6'5". It's a reasonable price for him. I just feel like if I go to Ely here, then Connor's going to be the one, or Parrish, who Parrish seems to have now been the one to fall out of favor after in the beginning of the season. He was getting a lot of carries. So I think all 3 will get work. Baylor defense is a hell of a lot tougher than Ole Miss. So I could see them struggling a little bit here, but touchdown equity wise, I do feel like the Ole Miss running backs will be the guys that score the touchdowns, even if the yardage isn't there. Ontario Drummond is too cheap at 6.8, but I think it's going to be hard at the end of the day to probably ultimately fit him at that price, unless you are, not going with Tay Martin, which I don't think you need to. I just like him, or fading Wandale, or, not going with JSN, which would be probably a little silly. Or if you have a way to fit all three, and 3 pay-ups at wide receiver, I think that's a strong maneuver here because we do have the value available to us at the running back spot. And at quarterback, if you go, the 6 to 7K range, there is a myriad of valuable and viable options that you go with. Drummond at 6'8", he feels like a really strong, safe play. We know that Johnny Mingo is back. He returned in week 12, kind of broke off some rust, only 1 catch. The game after that against Mississippi State, 4 for 21. I would expect him to be, fully healthy here. He'll take some work from Drummond, but it really is Drummond's team. What you can do now with them getting healthy, and even seeing, Braylon Sanders with a couple catches the last few weeks, the Ja'Cory Pearsons, Dennis Jackson, another of Kuchek's guys, JRP, John Rice Plumlee, Casey Kelly, you can start riding those guys off again. Although it is bowl season, so Casey Kelly 4 touchdown game is really, could be on someone's bingo card. It wouldn't shock me. But you can really kind of go back to just focusing on Drummond, Mingo, and to a lesser degree Sanders. I just don't think the passing offense will be so prevalent that it can feed all those mouths, especially when they've been running the football recently. You may see, a long touchdown for Mingo or Drummond, but I just don't know outside of Drummond that any of them will get the volume. It may be spread out, and Matty C may decide to keep everyone happy and just spread the ball around. I could definitely see that happening as well. But Drummond at 6'8" feels like a very fair price, even against Baylor. So looking at this slate, there are, like I said, 2 really main ways to go. With no in-betweens in your main. So you either just decide to pay up at QB and be done with it and try to lock those points in, or you take a gander with Clifford rising, maybe Bohannon, and then you just pay up at the wide receiver spot, take those mid-range Abram Smith, Jalen Warren running backs with Tyree, and have a balanced lineup. Balanced lineup is something that is a very overlooked and underrated build nowadays because everybody is always looking to stuff those studs and they're always looking for those values. And it's because those of you that play pro sports like NBA and NFL and MLB, you're always looking for that ability to get the guy with the guaranteed points. And it works to a fair amount of time, but you'll, like you see in basketball, especially lately, when those guys don't hit that 5X number or 35 plus, you're in a world of hurt because you're if you have to rely on your 3K guy to get you the points, you're definitely in trouble. So keep that in mind. Sometimes it's better to have 6-7 guys scoring 20 plus as opposed to 2 scoring 40 and then a bunch of 5 to 10 scores. Really all depends, obviously. As John Madden would say, rest in peace. To beat your opponent, you just have to score more points than them. So it's really kind of just an easy game. Let's talk some prize picks here in a minute. I'll give a core, and then we'll get out of here. Drummond is a solid GPP play. Yeah, I think you could use Drummond in cash too. I mean, honestly, looking at it, like you could do Robinson, JSN, and Drummond as your 3 wide receivers. Here, let's click it in. I'm gonna start doing my screen. I'm gonna start sharing my screen with you guys too when we do basketball shows. Probably starting next week. I've had some requests for that, so we can maybe even build a show lineup. Something I've been wanting to do. Just keep that in mind. And then I want Tavian Thomas, and let's plug in Tyree. So Tyree, Thomas, those 3 wideouts. That leaves us with an average of 5.5. So then that's automatically. So that's going to pigeonhole us into a quarterback like Clifford, right? Let's see. This is not looking like a bad lineup. And then we have a super flex spot for 5.3. The only problem with that, it would appear, is that I might not be able to get my guy Abram Smith or Jalen Warren. So I guess the decision there is Drummond or Tavian Thomas. That's what it's looking like to me. And in that case, yes, I would play Thomas over Drummond. So maybe Drummond does become more of a GPP guy. But I do think there's a lot of merit to running those 3 as your wide receiver trio. I don't see any of them busting, to be honest. We're getting into the group of teams now with guys who actually produce at wide receiver, and they all have major target shares expected with their WR2s and WR3s being out in the case of Wan'Dale Robinson, and JSN jumping from the technical WR3, even though he's basically a shared WR1 into the primary spot. Drummond is the one that has everybody healthy. So yeah, Drummond is definitely looking more like a GBP play when you work it out like that. All right, core wise, I'm going to skip quarterback for a minute. Running back core, it's got to be Jalen Warren for me. I just don't know how to get away from him at that price of 6-1. I think the volume will be there, but you could easily say Abram Smith as a core or Tavian Thomas. That trio is kind of what I'm working with, and Tyree as the four running backs I'd be looking at. Wide receiver core. Man, I don't want to be lame, but Wan'Dale Robinson is just not fadeable. Even at 8-2. And then at quarterback, I'll say Clifford, just as like that is the responsible. This is me being a parent. You guys would be my kids. The responsible decision and choice would be Clifford. I want to get up to Jefferson. I have a lot of guys that I want to pay up for. This is going to get kind of dicey. So I'm probably going to end up playing a wide. My WR3 is kind of a cheap guy, which I hate doing, but I just feel like KJ is going to go off. I feel like obviously JSN and Wan'Dale are going to go off, and then that group of 3 or 4 wide running backs. That's really the group I'm looking at, which does not allow me to pay up for CJ Stroud or Matty Corral, which could be a problem. I'm drawing a line in the sand though, and I'm going to let others play those guys, which will bring down the ownership for the players I am highest on, which is absolutely okay with me. That's the way I play anyways, and that's my preferred way to play. So I'm happy with that. Prize picks. Let's see here. Let's start with passing yards. So right away, I'm interested in Sean Clifford. I would be way more interested if Dodson played, but 217.5 passing yards. That feels like a pretty good number against Arkansas. I think he should be able to hit the over there. So definitely considering that. Rushing, that's the only one there. The others look pretty good. Rushing yards, I like KJ Jefferson over 38.5. I think he's going to have like a vintage looking Desmond Ridder game to where he rushes for 75% of score, throws a couple, like maybe even hits the bonus. Just without Traylon Burks there, I don't think people realize how much usage that is, and they're going to rely on their guy quite heavily. Jalen Warren over 77.5 rushing yards. I'm just a believer in him, and I don't care about this matchup being tough on paper. Tavian Thomas over 88.5 rushing yards. You could take that all the way to 95 and feel pretty confident about that cashing. I'll definitely have that in a fair amount of my parlays. And then Abram Smith's 92.5 is probably going to hit 100, but that's a little closer. Receiving yards. Parker Washington over 65.5. So, if Clifford's going to go for 217 plus, would make sense for Parker to be over that. I think Parker's probably going to push 100 tomorrow. Let's see. JSN is already at 101.5. I will take the over there. He's going to have so many targets. It's going to look ridiculous at the end of his stat line is going to look so stupid at the end of the day. Like I'm talking 15 catches type production from him against Utah. He's just going to get completely peppered. I know I thought that about Jamison Williams, but there's all the volume's going to go to him. And then as far as fantasy scores go, that is one that gets overlooked. I think people get so involved with props, they forget to look at the actual, fantasy scores and see if there's any that are looking kind of, decent, and see where Abram Smith, where his 90-ish rushing yards is an okay prop. His fantasy score of 17, to me, that would be an over, because I am expecting him to push on the door of 20 to 22 fantasy points. So I like the over 17 there. That should be enough to get you guys started. I will have in the article, I usually list my favorites, and in the prize picks tracker, which at this current moment in time is free. I will add the tracker to the article, and I'll post it on Twitter if you guys want to follow along. If you're in a state that's legal for prize picks, definitely Tail. We've had a really good season on college football, and we're doing well on college basketball for prize picks as well. We also have a bet tracker where we do our props and other bets. So if you guys are into that thing, or you have a ability to do that, definitely check it out. And then I know FanDuel gets ignored a lot. I'm sorry to my FanDuel grinders. It's not that I'm doing it on purpose. It just kind of ends up that way because their slates are usually different or they don't offer as much. So I will have a FanDuel core listed in my article as well, rest assured. But just real quick, on FanDuel, it's a little different. So I would core there JSN as my wide receiver core. At running back, I would certainly look at Abram Smith there too. He's only 8.3 on FanDuel, which is really good, or Jalen Warren at 8.2. And then at quarterback, it's a little different because of the way the pricing is there. I think you could probably fit the 10-7 Matty C there pretty easily, but I'll say to core Sean Clifford at 8K. It's a good price, a good safe option. So pretty similar to the DK core. That pretty much wraps it up. Make sure if you guys came in late, don't worry. It will be available on demand, which I will post on my Twitter account here momentarily. I will also be in the Discord tomorrow morning, an hour or two prior to lock. The article, expect that out by like 5 a.m. Pacific time. Whenever the editors get to it, it will be sitting there for them. And then if you are, hanging out with me on New Year's Eve / New Year's Day and you're not out, getting hammered and partying, in about 35-ish minutes, I'll be back with the college basketball show. So I appreciate it, guys. I love doing this. This is my thing. So I will see you guys later. Can you add me in Discord? Yeah, just Josh, DM me on Twitter at dubdeuce85 and we'll get you taken care of. Thanks, guys. Appreciate it. Best of luck. Let's win lots of money. Last slate. And then real quick, showdown for Kansas State game next week. We'll have content for that. The 2-game, I think there's maybe one more 2-game slate left as well. And then, of course, the championship slate showdown. There'll be content and probably a show for the championship game. So rest assured, this isn't the end just yet. Thanks, guys.